Mr. C, Zachary Myers. And Zachary Myers, I believe, if my memory serves me, was a 2007 graduate of Marshall University. So he's struggled through accounting 311 and struggled through accounting 312 at Marshall, so he can certainly relate to what it's like to be in your shoes. But he has a lot of insight into what it's like to explore different career paths in the accounting profession. So he currently owns his own firm where he is where he has served as an expert witness in over 2,000 different cases. So if you're interested in forensic accounting and valuation, Zach really can provide some answers there. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you, Zach, and let you take it away.
All right. Can everyone see my PowerPoint yet?
Okay, we don't see your PowerPoint yet, so maybe Ashlee could help you with that. PowerPoint's always a little tricky.
Yeah.
Yeah, you should be able to share your slides with us because I have the all participants enabled.
And I'm just going to ask while he's working on getting his slides up, if you would, if you're here joining us, please, turn on your mics to mute. That would be great.
Yeah, I do talk a lot and I talk too much sometimes, but it'd be better for everybody to at least mute. You can ask me any questions you want afterwards. Let's see how this works.
All right, we can see it now.
Can you see it now?
Yep, looks good. You might want to put it in presentation mode, but other than that, it looks good.
All right, so everybody can see my pretty face?
Yep, we can see it.
Good deal. All right, well, I appreciate the opportunity to come and talk to you guys today. I appreciate that introduction. I told myself I wasn't going to make today all about me, but then I talked to everybody and they said, actually, you have to talk about yourself a whole lot. So I'm sorry, but I'm going to do a little bit of showboating today. But hopefully today, after the end of the presentation, you'll understand what I do, see what I've done, how I got to be a forensic accountant, all the different opportunities that it's enabled me to have, and hopefully future forensic accountants. Like she said, I graduated with my accounting degree from Marshall in 2007. I am a certified public accountant, as well as a certified valuation analyst. CPA, I think everyone pretty much knows what that is. The CVA was an additional credential that I obtained that qualifies me to perform business valuations and even certain aspects of forensic accounting. Like she said, I've been retained in over 2,000 engagements as a testifying, consulting, or joint court-appointed forensic accounting expert since 2011. It's actually a little bit more than that, but those are just the ones that I can keep track of for the moment. There are a lot of people that claim to be experts, and you can't just say you're an expert when it comes to forensic accounting and being an expert witness. You actually have to be qualified in court before a judge, and basically, they have to be, that you have to prove to them that based on your knowledge, skill, experience, education, and so on and so forth, that you know what you're talking about and that you are qualified to testify in some regard. Now, forensic accounting is a very broad category. I mean, we'll talk about this here in a few slides, but forensic accounting encompasses a number of things. I've been qualified as an expert in forensic accounting in federal district court, state court, circuit court, Family Law Court, which is like divorce court, and the West Virginia Human Rights Commission. I've also been qualified as a business valuation expert in the Family Law Court, and a pension valuation expert in Family Law Court, and a taxation expert in Federal District Court. One of the things that helps you become qualified, or at least I would highly recommend that you have as a first step, is experience in public accounting and also getting your CPA. Most of the time, if you have your CPA and you go to testify in some forensic accounting regard in court, you will probably be accepted as an expert witness. And it's a huge benefit to have your CPA. It's very, very difficult to become qualified as an expert in anything without credentials. So I can't emphasize this enough. Get your CPA. It's going to be very hard. It's going to be very difficult. Literally, it is the hardest thing, one of the hardest things I've ever had to go through, but it is very much worth it. And if you want to do forensic accounting and all the things that I'm getting ready to talk about, a CPA will be essential. I spoke with some of your classmates earlier, and I told them also that I would highly recommend, before you just jump into forensic accounting, that you have a few solid years of public accounting experience doing basic like audits, tax, maybe some consulting. Internal bookkeeping can help as well, because it's very hard to say you're a forensic accounting expert if you don't have any experience in public accounting. That would start with, a bachelor's degree in accounting, very helpful. CPA shortly thereafter, and during the time that you're studying and taking your CPA, you're going to gain that experience component, and you'll be well on your way to becoming a forensic accountant. One of the first things about being an expert witness is you cannot take yourself too seriously. So I just wanted to show this slide. This is going to be a picture of me back the year that I graduated Marshall compared to me now. I was a B- student, and I say that kind of liberally. That was on a good day. I wasn't the best student all the time. So for those of you who from time to time struggle with, getting straight A's or anything like that, it's not a requirement. It's accounting is hard. It is a very hard major, but it's very well worth the degree. One of the best feelings you'll ever have in your life is when you have your last accounting class. Trust me.
Zach, I don't think your slides are progressing. So if you would just check that. It's kind of stuck on the first slide. I hate to interrupt, but.
No, by all means. Can you see?
There we go. Yeah, that works.
I don't know why it keeps clicking me out of presentation mode. Well, what I'm showing now is the comparison of me in 2007 to me now. Back in 2007, when I graduated with my accounting degree, I was just an average person. I don't know what type of look I was trying to pull off there with the puka shell and the cornrows, but I thought that looked good at the time. I was a B- student in accounting on a good day. Pretty solid PlayStation gamer at the time, and I thought I was making tons of money as a bookkeeper, making $12 an hour. In fact, I thought at that time that I was making so much money that I actually took off like a year and a half from my accounting classes to just do nothing but be a bookkeeper, because I thought I had literally hit big money at that time. And then I started to see my fellow classmates graduating with their accounting degrees and making a good bit more than $12 an hour. And I luckily decided to go back and finish up, and that helped me to get to where I'm at today. Now, I've done a number of things in my career, but one of the coolest things about being a forensic expert is you get to testify in court. It's generally the highest hourly rate. I mean, not all the time, but generally, I don't know anybody that has a higher hourly rate in accounting in this state, but I could be wrong. But it's generally going to pay higher than the other fields in my experience. It's not always the case, but generally that's going to be the highest revenue generator for any firm is the forensic accounting department or consulting department, because litigation support is always in demand. People always are going to get divorced. People are always going to get injured or terminated, or their business will be destroyed in a business interruption. So, all of my clients are attorneys. And so therefore they're dealing with cases that are either in litigation or pre-litigation, which they're trying to decide whether or not to sue somebody. Sometimes they just want to know, well, is this case worth it? So I do a lot of those as well. Being a forensic accountant has also helped me become a thought leader, and I do a lot of articles we'll talk about later. I've also been a member of various standard setting boards, which is probably one of the best experiences of my life. And to the extent that you can be active in any board, and especially any sort of standard setting board, down the road, it will behoove you as a forensic expert, because it's one thing to testify to how to calculate something. It's another thing to say that you took part in writing the rules to how you calculate something. So it's very much standard setting and forensic accounting, if you can pull it off, actually do go hand in hand. I want to clarify first and foremost what forensic means. Just to be very, very clear, the AICPA has a couple different places I've seen it used, but generally the word forensic means used in or suitable to courts of law or public debate. As it relates to forensic accounting services, that means that it involves the application of specialized knowledge and investigative skills to collect, analyze, and evaluate evidential matter and to interpret and communicate findings. Long story short, I have to explain very complex things in a simple way that the judge and the jury can understand. The whole purpose of being an expert witness is to help the trier of fact, which means the judge or the jury or the jury, understand the evidence. So there's a number of instances where that comes into play. All of those instances revolve around how much, and I try to say this so you guys understand what I'm doing in the easiest, simplest way. In most litigation, they're trying to determine how much economic damages, how much money did you lose because you got ran over by a truck and can no longer work? How much money do you have to pay your ex-spouse because you're getting divorced and you have to split your assets and your liabilities in an equitable way? How much money was taken from you in a fraud case? I do a lot of fraud cases. Those are very time consuming and very hard, but those are very interesting and fun cases to do sometimes. Professional malpractice. How bad did the other CPA mess up? I do a lot of those cases. Those are also interesting. Child support analysis. How much do you owe for your kids? Spousal support. How much do you owe your spouse or ex-spouse? Wrongful termination. How much would you be getting paid had they not fired you? These are all things that end up in litigation. You end up in family court when it comes to divorce, when it comes to criminal stuff like fraud or misappropriation. Those end up in criminal court. You have civil court, which is things like economic damages, personal injury, wrongful termination. Basically, it's not something criminal. It's a civil matter where one party is suing the other for money. A good portion of the work that I do revolves around calculating a loss of earnings but for a termination, or getting fired or terminated from a job, or an injury, or lost profits for a business interruption. I do a fair amount of tax and financial reporting fraud cases as well, or underreporting cases. So basically, when it comes down to a forensic accounting background, or what you would have to deal with in forensic accounting, dealing with everybody looking to you to determine what the right number is. Tell me how much money I'm owed. Tell me how much money I have to pay. Tell me what the value of my business is. Tell me how much value my business lost because we had a business interruption or a flood or a breach of contract. And these are not very easy things to calculate. They require a number of backgrounds. They definitely require, it definitely behooves you to have a strong background in public accounting, like I said earlier, because you wouldn't think that having a background in, say, bookkeeping or public accounting would help you in a loss of a wrongful termination where somebody was fired wrongfully because they were discriminated against, and now they need someone to calculate their damages to show how much money that the former employer has to pay them for discriminating against them. You wouldn't think that that has a lot of accounting, but it actually does, because you have to have an understanding of payroll, employer paid benefits. You have to have a number of forecasting applications and things like that. And so it helps to be well-rounded. At the same time, this work is outside of the normal sort of accounting box that you see. Now, I was an auditor for like 5 years, and I think that there's a Mr. Fuller in the crowd today whose dad was actually my first manager at Hayflick. And I'm not going to say anything, but if you ask his dad who the best auditor was that he's ever met in his life, he might say me. I'm not going to hold him to that. You can maybe ask. I remember Mr. Fuller actually running around the office when he was like 7 or 8 years old. So it's interesting to see him watching this presentation. But when it comes to forensic accounting, this is some of the coolest stuff that you're going to ever have to do when it comes to having a CPA. The best thing about forensic accounting, I think, there's a number of great things about it, but one of the best things about it is on a day-to-day basis, my daily routine changes. I can be working on a divorce one day. The next day, I could be working on a fraud case. The next day, I could be working on a tax embezzlement case or something like that. And it's really, really, you have to think outside the box oftentimes. It is a very high level of pressure because you're dealing with attorneys most, if not all of the time. I will say it's great to have a court rule that a client has to pay you, because if they don't pay you, they can get in trouble. So I generally get like 100% of my accounts receivable, which is a great thing. That's not always the case in all other forms of accounting. But I sort of got into this on accident, oddly enough. I worked as an auditor for 5 years, and the firm that I was working for at the time, they wanted to get into forensic accounting and business valuation. And they called me down to the conference room, and they, I thought I was in trouble. But they said, well, Zach, we have an opportunity for you to sort of work as a leased employee. You're a really good auditor, but we think that your forensic auditing skills could be used in a better way. And we'd like for you to work sort of job shadow under this guy that had a firm, a forensic accounting firm in Charleston, and kind of help us establish a footprint. And so they leased me to this firm for a little while, under the understanding that eventually they were going to acquire this forensic accounting firm. So the auditing firm that I was working for was going to acquire the forensic accounting firm, and in order to facilitate that acquisition, they were going to lease me to the forensic accounting firm, teach me forensic accounting.
That, gonna put this away and then make meal number 2.
basically I would be able to get into that. But the acquisition fell through, and when it fell through, I was sort of in the middle of a bunch of cases, and I had not many choices but to stay there. But my background in auditing helps tremendously. Public accounting is an extremely valuable experience to have when it comes to forensic accounting, because you really can't get away with saying you're a forensic accounting expert if you haven't done, quite a few tax returns or audits or consulting engagements. It just kind of comes along with it. I've seen people try to get or jump right into forensic accounting, and they don't make that transition very smoothly if they have no public accounting experience. I was talking earlier to a group of your classmates, and I was saying, I had an expert on the other side of a case that was a sociology major. He didn't have an accounting degree or any accounting experience, and the guy was just lost. I don't even know why he was trying, but I would highly recommend, if you go into forensic accounting, you spend at least 3 to 5 years in public accounting as a start, and before you really will have the chance to testify or anything like that in court, you probably get to work on cases and reports and things like that. And before I forget, just a little bit of background about the litigation process. All of my clients are attorneys. Whenever there are opposing sides in litigation that require an expert witness, both sides can hire their own expert witness. The court can appoint a neutral expert witness as well if they feel the need to. Both sides can jointly retain you. There's a number of ways, but there's a very official process that the attorneys have to go through with naming the expert witness, disclosing that expert witness. Generally, like in the case of, say, economic damages, if somebody gets ran over by a truck and they can no longer work anymore, the attorney for the plaintiff is going to retain me and disclose my name to the court as an expert witness, and the disclosure will basically say, we're Zachary Myers is going to be our economic damages expert. He's going to calculate economic damages as a result of, Timmy getting ran over by the Walmart truck, and he can no longer work anymore. And Mr. Myers is going to offer testimony of his opinion of how much Timmy's loss of earnings are. The opposing side will then have the opportunity to hire their own expert if they want to rebut or try to discredit my calculation. This is a very unique situation. It's very high, it's very intense, very high stress. But if you can deal with that sort of stuff, like, working around attorneys, if you're the type of person that likes to double, triple, quadruple check your work, and you're really, really detailed, one of the things I was always told as an auditor was that I always did too much. I would always do what I was required to do, but then I'd also do at least 3 or 4 steps beyond that weren't necessarily necessary. And that can be a good thing in certain instances, but it's not always a good thing from an auditing standpoint, because you're going to break the budget if you spend a bunch of time looking for something. And even if you find it, that's great, but it may not be the most cost-effective way to utilize your skill, which is why I ultimately went into forensic accounting. But long story short, forensic accounting is not for the weak. Oftentimes I'll get an expert on the opposing side that literally will write an entire report that'd be, 50, 100 pages of basically talking crap about the way that I calculated something. And it's a shock the first time that you read one of these reports, because basically it's called a rebuttal report, where one expert puts out a calculation and the opposing expert will put out their own calculation and try to rebut it. And it's amazing some of the things that they'll say. But it's kind of cool because you also then get to rebut their rebuttal report. And I think it's one of the coolest things that I do is technically dismantling an opposing expert on anything that they say that is wrong, and one of the things that's very necessary to being a forensic expert is you have to be unimpeachably neutral, meaning unbiased. You have to be honest. You have to carry yourself at all points in time with a very high level of professionalism. Like, you probably won't see me making too many birthday posts. You can say happy birthday to me on social media all you want to, but I try not to post very many things other than thought leadership or articles or things that I write, because you don't want to ever do something that looks bad. Because if you get in front of the court, or if you get, subpoenaed for a deposition as an expert, lawyers can ask you anything. They literally can ask you just about anything, and if you got some craziness on your social media that you didn't delete or you shouldn't have put up on the first place, that's not going to work. Trust me. It's one of the first places I actually look whenever I have an opposing expert. Is I try to look up as much stuff as I can find on Google to see what all is out there. Now that's the stuff that I get paid for. But one of the things about forensic accounting, and especially once you get further on in your career, there's going to be things you get paid for and things that you don't get paid for, but you get a benefit from. I've had the opportunity many times to be a part of a standard setting board, meaning I was a part of a board that wrote the rules for the experts that do what I do, which is a very, very good position to be in as an expert, because it's always good, like I said before, to not only be able to say that you have to follow the rules, but you may have actually actively participated in creating or modifying or promulgating those accounting standards or forensic accounting standards or evaluation standards or whatever. In 2016, I was elected to the NACVA Standards Board, which writes the business valuation rules for at least about 7,000 experts around the country. My second year on the board in 2017, I was appointed as vice chair. And then my third year, I was elected by the board as chair. And I was actually elected chair back to back in 2018 and 2019 of the NACVA Standards Board. So basically, I was the chair of the board that writes the rules for the experts that do what I do. And that's really, really nice to be able to say that. Having the job title of expert is a great job title, trust and believe that. But it's even better to be in that position. They didn't just give that position to me. I had to work very hard to get to that, and we'll talk about that here in a second. But after I was done with my back-to-back terms as the chair of the NACVA Standards Board, I was appointed to the Global Association of Evaluators and Analysts, which is the international version of the standard setters for the NACVA, which promulgates international evaluation standards throughout the world. And then in 2021, I was elected to the Business Valuation Resource Panel, the Appraisal Foundation, TAF. Now, for a lot of you guys, you probably don't care about these organizations, or you may not even be able to remember what I just said. And I know from testifying that people learn differently. One of the reasons why I didn't want handouts given to you guys today is because I know that those take people's attention away from the speaker. I learned that the hard way in court I used to make copies of my reports and hand out copies to the judge, the opposing counsel, and every member of the jury. And if the bail bondsman needed a copy, I'd give him one too. But I didn't do that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you, I'm going to go over these things that I just went over, all these board positions, but visually, because everyone pays attention differently. So whenever I present a case in court, I try to mix it up. I try to not take their attention away by giving them like a printout of my calculation, but I try to explain things to them visually as well as audibly, explaining them, verbally. Now, what I just got done saying was in 2016, I was elected to the NACVA Standards Board. I'm the only Black board member in NACBA Standards Board history. We're working on diversity as it relates to the accounting profession, but not to talk bad about the NACBA, they actually have a vastly more diverse board membership than some of the other accounting or financial boards that I've seen. They have a fairly healthy mix of females. Of course, I was the only African American member on that particular year, as well as the second year. And then my third year, when I was named the two-time chair, at that point, they literally had nothing but guys. That was kind of disappointing. Thankfully, right now, the current board has the current standards board has 3 women on it, I believe, maybe 4, and that's great. One of the things that the profession is trying to get away from is a lack of diversity and inclusion, and I think that's a good thing. I think it's a very good thing to have as many different types of people from all around the country. One of the things that's interesting about these individuals that you're looking at here, it obviously wasn't, they weren't picking us all based on our looks, but these are some of the best experts around the country. I'll back up just a little bit, just so you can see. These are some of the absolute best experts in their state in business valuation and forensic accounting. The guy on the top right, the guy in the middle left, far left, and the guy in the very center at the bottom, they literally wrote the NACBA standards. They were the first 3 NACBA standards chairs, and I was the first chair of the standards board that didn't write the rules. That was kind of cool. Mr. Zip here, he was literally one of the best experts I've ever met. These are all very astute, highly paid, nationally known experts. So it was very interesting for me, especially being at least every year that I was a board member, I was the youngest board member on each one of these boards for the most part. And it's an interesting experience when you have people that are like literally twice your age and you're trying to be the chair of a board that has initiatives like writing standard interpretations, or one of the projects that we worked on was reconciling all of the valuation standards in the world and in the United States that are promulgated by the USPAP, AICPA, RICS, IVS. Those sort of initiatives that we put together were not easy, and it's especially hard to tell somebody that literally wrote the rules before I was born what to do or try to give them any guidance, but I pulled it off. I'm going to give you these slides afterwards so you guys can actually go and look at the standards comparison charts. I wasn't just named the chair 2 years in a row because they like me. I literally busted my butt and put a lot of time into these 2 charts, which are, one is the International Valuation Standards chart and one is the Domestic Valuation Standards chart. These charts literally compare all of the standards for valuation in the United States under the AICPA, the ASA, IBA, and USPAP, as well as the international comparison for valuation standards around the globe. They kind of look like this, if you guys can see that. And basically, this took a lot of time, and I wasn't paid for it either. But in your career, you're going to have to do things like that, especially if you're going to try to be a forensic accounting expert. Because one of the things that experts compete on is a battle of the resume, and who has the most, published articles, who has the most peer-reviewed studies and things like that. This is an example. I spent, I don't know how many nights sleeping on the couch because of these charts. And it was well worth it, but at the same time, it took a lot of time. It was a very intricate and detailed study that I took part in, and there's a number of instances where you're gonna probably need to do things like this, and they're not gonna necessarily be paid. None of the board positions I've ever had have been paid. very few opportunities will come up where you are paid to be on a board, but you're going to have to be able to try to participate in things with standard setting bodies and studies and things like that if you were going to try to call yourself an expert. You can't just call yourself an expert but not write anything, or not have any studies, or not be a member of any boards whatsoever, other than like your, homeowners association. You're not going to be able to pull that off. I actually was lucky enough to be given credit on like the last page of this study, and this is a huge study. The only other people named on this study, on both the international and the domestic study, was the people that actually wrote the standards. So to be the only person that didn't write the standards and get named in the study was great. Because of the work that I did on the International Evaluation Standards Comparison Chart, I was named the liaison for the United States on the Global Association of Certified Evaluators and Analysts. Interestingly, this is only a small portion. The GACVA encompasses Africa, Canada, Europe, India, Taiwan, and Southeast Asia. I'm also a member, and I couldn't find a picture of all the members of this board here online, but this is actually probably the most astute board that I'm a member of now. And the reason I say that is if you look at the names of the people on this board, you may not recognize the names, but you'll definitely recognize the companies that they work for or are partners in. My first name is Clinton. I go by C. Zachary Myers, but you see Clinton Myers here, little C. Zachary Myers PLLC. Then you see Credit Suisse, Valid Advisors, KPMG, USC, Adjunct Professor, Deloitte, Duff and Phelps. If you know anything about any of these companies, these are big hitters. The individuals on this board are very well known. These are not just nationally known people. These are like the best, sometimes in the world, some of these people. This particular board doesn't make rules, but we're a panel of basically experts from the various forensic accounting evaluation subspecializations that basically inform the Appraisal Foundation Board of Trustees as to the status of forensic accounting, business valuation, and all the different disciplines within it. This is a very interesting board. Literally, the people on it, some of them are just amazingly brilliant. The chair of this board, he doesn't even live in America. I believe he's from the Netherlands. Very interesting guy, Andrew Pike. But these sort of things are very important as a forensic accounting expert if you can be a participant in these things, because it's going to build your CV, which is basically a fancy term for your resume. Every time they disclose you as an expert, they're going to have to disclose all of your board participation or board memberships, or anytime you chaired a board or anything like that. You guys can go on my LinkedIn profile and look at my CV, which a CV, I call it a fancy name for a resume, but it's really not. It's a little different. Like a CV is not the type of thing that you would necessarily turn in to try to get a job from somebody. Literally, they're written in like the third person omniscient voice. Like I have to refer to myself as Mr. Myers. Mr. Myers has testified in over 2,000 cases, and blah, blah, blah. Like you kind of have to tone it up a little bit, because you have to really emphasize your expertise, your qualifications. And if you tone it down too much, they may not take you seriously. One of the problems that I had early on was I was really, really young. I was actually qualified as an expert in forensic accounting when I wasn't even 30 years old yet. And the majority of the people that were the opposing experts that I went against in court looked like Richard Gere, like, gray hair, shiny, like literally like slick guys, like guys that look like they're experts in a number of things. And then here I come, this, 20-something, 30-something expert. It was very difficult to get credibility. But with the assistance of having my CPA and my CBA and participating in the various standard setting boards, I was able to sort of push my way through and get the credibility through a lot of hard work and effort that I wanted to get and deserve. One of the things that I'm participating in now is pretty neat because it really doesn't, it's not a board position, it's just a membership of the National Society of Black Certified Public Accountants. They offer a number of things to Black Certified Public Accountants. It's really an underserviced or underrepresented part of CPAs. I think there's less than 1% of all CPAs in the United States are Black. There's a number of reasons for that, structural, systemic, and other things. And sometimes it has nothing to do with racism in and of itself. There's a number of reasons for that. Women, the same thing. We're starting to see more women be a part of the accounting profession, but there's a number of strides that need to be taken in that particular realm as well. And so one of the things I'm trying to do is be a mentor to a number of people that are taking the CPA exam that are part of the National Society of Black Certified Public Accountants. I also mentor a number of people outside of that as well. And you can always call me at any point in time if you ever have a question. I'm probably one of the most accessible people that you'll ever meet. I try to be accessible anyways. I can't always take your call or respond to your email the next day, but I will get back to you. One of the things I do like about the NSB CPA is that they have Black females in leadership, not just Black, but females. If you'll notice on the boards that I was on previously, there weren't a ton of females on there. You're starting to see more and more females, and that's a very important thing. I think oftentimes you'll see people that are, females won't get paid the same amount as males, and you will see them less and less in positions of leadership. So I love seeing females in positions of leadership, and I hope to really see more of that in the future. One of the things that all of the organizations are trying to attempt to do right now is diversify, and that's not only for inclusion of different races, but also more females. And I think that it's going to take some time to see any sort of real changes in that regard, but those changes are occurring, and I think it's fantastic. And it is hard to be one of the underrepresented demographics in public accounting because for so long it's been a very male-dominated, white male-dominated profession. And it's not necessarily even a racist thing, it's just the way that it's been. And so there's a number of barriers we have to break and get through. One of the best ways to do that, I feel, is to learn one another. And you guys come and see a person like myself who I don't get a lot of sun, so I may look more Puerto Rican, but I definitely have seen a number of instances where people didn't get jobs or got passed over for certain things, and it wasn't even necessarily having to do with racism. It just had to do with people not understanding how to communicate interculturally or how to deal with maybe say a person of the opposite sex in a position of management over and above them. It's going to be very important, and I think your generation does a far better job than my generation or the generation before me did, and hopefully it continues to be that trend. But one of the best things about, I guess, forensic accounting is that I have to learn how to communicate to people. I oftentimes, especially in West Virginia, have to go to the middle of nowhere, like McDowell County or something, and go and testify in front of 12 people who have never seen a minority of any type. And not only testify, but they have to believe me and trust what I'm saying and believe what I'm saying and feel that I know what I'm talking about. And even if you know what you're talking about, it's not always easy. It doesn't matter even what color you are. Sometimes you can know exactly what you're talking about and you just not come across as if you are an expert in a particular field. Forensic accounting, it gives the opportunity for people that maybe are not the introvert, that are maybe more extroverted and can communicate complex things in a more simplified way to various types of people. And I know that that particular characteristic does not always get, you don't always get very much value out of that in public accounting. Sometimes you kind of feel like, it's sort of dominated by this sort of, drone inside the box way of thinking. The great thing about forensic accounting, if you work those first 3 to 5 years in public accounting and you're like, well, I really don't fit in. I'm really totally different than everybody else. Well, that may be possible, and that may mean not that you don't need to be an accountant anymore, but rather you need to get into something else like forensic accounting, which gives you a number of opportunities to think outside the box, utilize your accounting background, and also do some of the most exciting things that accounting has to offer. I also get a sense of being rewarded or helping someone out with forensic accounting oftentimes, especially when you have cases where, somebody's been, they've had someone fraudulently take advantage of them. And that happens a lot. Elder abuse is a big thing around this area. But you also see other cases where people just have employees take money and things like that. When you figure things out, or when you are hired by a defendant that's being accused of something that they actually didn't do, and you're able to, provide your expertise to that case, you feel like you actually accomplished something. Not that you don't get those things when it comes to like doing audits or taxes, but it's not nearly as rewarding as, doing a forensic investigation, uncovering a bunch of money that's, hidden or, misappropriated or something like that. Forensic accounting provides an opportunity to sort of have that rewarding feeling like you're actually doing something. I've done a lot of work for the state of West Virginia and a lot of federal and state government type of cases. Got a lot of money for pension plans back, for investment fraud schemes and things like that. I will say one of the downsides to forensic accounting is most of the best things that you'll ever do in your career, you're not allowed to talk about. So, and you won't ever read about them either, because they usually settle in a back room with somebody neither denying or admitting any guilt, but paying a whole lot of money. But that's okay. I have a series of articles called the Unimpeachable Neutrality series. I think I have about 8 articles right now. I've been writing it since 2017. If you want to really, really know what forensic accounting is all about, I would highly, highly suggest that you take a look at these articles. The first article I wrote, you got to read them in order pretty much, because you kind of see the progression of my experience in forensic accounting when you read these. Thought leadership is very important, and you have to be very responsible with thought leadership, especially when you're on like a standard setting board. I can't, as the chair of a standard setting board, I can't just write anything I want to write and just expect that someone won't take something that I say and look at it in a vacuum or misinterpret it or believe that it represents the opinion of the NACBA. One of the things I started to see whenever I became the chair of various standards boards was in court, the opposing experts would literally come after my head and try to show somehow where the chair of the standards board didn't follow standards, which was really annoying. But as long as you're honest and you do try your best to follow standards, you should be okay. But I write a lot extensively about forensic accounting and business valuation and expert witness testimony in these articles. And of course, I have a very biased opinion. I think they're fantastic, but I'll let you guys decide that. The second page of articles, that's where they really start to get really, really good. I start to get a little bit more of a stronger voice in these articles, and I actually start to take more of a standard setting voice. And if you actually go and do the homework and you look about some of the things I write about, and then you look at the response of some of the other standard setting organizations as far as what they do and don't do. I'm not going to claim any of it, but if you do your homework and you read these articles and then you look at the history of when standards came out, forensic accounting standards or the international evaluation standards, and some of the things I write about, the standard setters themselves will tell you that they were influenced to some extent on just my thought leadership alone. And this can be, anybody can do this, but you have to be responsible about it. And you have to really be able to try to speak to some particular party. Like for me, I try to speak to both practitioners and potential clients when I write my articles. And you know, that's not always going to be the case if you do try to get into thought leadership, but if you do it effectively, that is another way to gain credibility as an expert. And peer-reviewed articles, which means like whenever you write an article and a peer of yours, there goes through a peer review process where they review your article, make sure you know what you're talking about and that you're not just making something up out of thin air. Peer-reviewed articles also help to build your sort of accounting repertoire in forensic accounting and business valuation. And I think I'm going to open it up to any and all questions, and I don't really care how crazy the question is. Just try to keep it forensic accounting related, and I hope you guys learned something today. And if you haven't, go ahead and ask me a question, and I'll try my best to answer.
Amanda, you appear to be on mute.
Thanks, Ashley. I forgot. So my question for you, Zach, is what is the craziest case you've been involved on that you can share with us?
The craziest case. A couple of years ago, I got a call from an individual who had a fairly large amount of money in a bank account that he had won in a large settlement years ago. And he had the suspicion that someone was stealing his money somehow. And he wanted to hire a forensic accountant to find out how the money was being stolen and like where the money went and who's taking it. And I had no reason to not believe this guy. I'd never met him before in my life. He seemed like he had been through a lot, and sure enough, you know, he retained me and gave me like 5 or 6 years of bank statements. And for the most part, everything he said was true. He had literally like $5 million in a bank account, and over the course of 5 years, that $5 million had dwindled down to about like $800,000. Now, as a forensic accountant, I had to take a look and see if I could try to figure out another way that this was happening. Maybe he was just spending all the money himself on something else, or you know, just being wasteful or something. But sure enough, when I looked at his accounting or his bank statements, I would see duplicate purchases at the same gas stations and restaurants. Like literally, he would go to like Speedway and he'd have like 3 charges for $10.15. Like he'd gone in and bought some cigarettes and a pop or something. And I was like, what is going on here? And I was like, well, maybe you have somebody that has access to your account information or your debit card, or maybe it's even somebody that works at one of these places that's stealing the money. I don't know. I mean, there's a number of ways that you can steal money. And the more I looked at it, the guy started to act kind of weird. And I noticed that he had different sort of like mannerisms and personalities. And then one day I noticed like he really seemed like he had a couple, he and I had a meeting, and I was going over the results of my forensic review, and I was talking to him about his invoice and how much, you know, he still owed and all that. And I said, well, I'll send you a final invoice once I get back to my office. And, he was like, okay, yeah, that's great. I really appreciate your help. And then when I get back to my office, I send him the email with my invoice, and he calls me like within 5 minutes, but he has a different voice. He's like, dude, what is this invoice for? This is not what I hired you for. And I was like, dude, it's like almost a totally different person. Well, lo and behold, it ended up being that guy had multiple personality disorder and really was actually stealing from himself. It was the craziest thing. I've never heard anything like it. But the guy is currently institutionalized. I wouldn't have taken the case if I had known that. But what he was basically doing was, I guess he had like a dominant personality that was spending money, but I guess mentally, and I'm not a doctor or anything, but he was basically stealing money from himself. Either that or he was putting on a huge charade that, fooled a bunch of doctors. But that was crazy because I wouldn't have taken the case had I known that he had multiple personalities and that one of the personalities was going to complain about an invoice. It was the weirdest thing that I've ever probably dealt with.
Well, I kind of thought you were going to say he had a twin, but I didn't see that one coming.
No, I didn't either. It was funny, but not funny at all. Really, it was the weirdest thing because literally he would have. It was too uncanny. He had to have some sort of mental problems because he literally would have 3 identical purchases from everywhere he went. So it was like one personality was basically buying the same thing as the personality before it, and when he got back home and he looked at his bank statements, every expense that he had spent, or all the money he had spent, had basically been spent 3 times, and he didn't remember spending it. And that's a significant problem when you're talking like $5 million. You can go through $5 million faster than most people would think, but that was crazy. I thought I was onto something because I was like, man, this is clearly somebody's like made a duplicate of your card or something, because one of the ways that to fraudulently take money would be to have a charge that would be a duplication of a prior charge, so that hopefully the person you're stealing the money from wouldn't catch it because it's the same dollar amount, which was the case, but it was him stealing the money from himself. So yeah.
Well, it looks like we have a question in the chat. I'll read it to you. It says,
Sure.
do you recommend some type of litigation background during undergrad if looking towards forensic work long-term? So possibly a minor in legal environment to become accustomed to the court system operations.
I don't think it's absolutely necessary, but I believe that you have to have legal environment, at least 2 courses in it in the business college. At least that's what it used to be. I think that's probably enough, but if you did happen to get some litigation experience, that would help you a little bit, but it's not 100% necessary. You're going to have to do a lot of reading, and you will have to short of going to law school, you will have to learn the ins and outs of the court system, the various, time schedules, like the order of things when the complaint is filed, when the motions are filed, and things like that. But over time, you'll learn those, I think, if you shadow with somebody. So it's not 100%. Like, I didn't work for a law firm necessarily, or have any real legal experience beyond my 2 business law classes at Marshall, and I gained most of my legal experience through sort of shadowing and working on the cases. They're not going to disclose you or even try to disclose you as an expert prior to you being ready. That can happen, but most of the time the lawyers are not going to take that risk. They're going to want to work with you over a long-term period of time. Like I literally wrote like expert reports, either co-authored them or authored them by myself for 2 years before I ever testified. I had actually written deposition and cross-examination questions for other experts for that same 2-year period before I ever got the chance to testify myself. And that can be a very valuable sort of way to get that experience. And every time you testify, you're going to get nervous, and it's going to be new and different every single time. But you will have ways, if you shadow under somebody, or if you work for a firm that has an established litigation department, I don't think you'll require legal experience in your undergrad necessarily. I'm not going to say it's not going to help, but I think there's going to be limitations. I think the most help you're going to get is the hands-on writing of the expert reports, working under another expert, you know, going through the procedures and things as an understudy, or co-authoring reports and things like that. That's the best way probably to get that the taste of the legal expertise you'll have to gain over time. And I will also, just before I forget, litigation support and forensic accounting is very jurisdiction specific. So you can think that you know how to calculate everything in the world, but you always have to check not only the jurisdiction specific rules, but if they've changed. If a case occurred in the prior month where a judge has a decision where they make a ruling that could impact your case. I talk about this in my unimpeachable neutrality series. You constantly have to stay abreast of not just the rules, but how the rules are interpreted and applied. And sometimes different jurisdictions will have the exact same rule, but they'll apply it differently. It's hard to explain, but like in divorce, for example, one jurisdiction may require that you utilize fair market value as the standard of value for valuing a business or marital asset. And then another jurisdiction may also say that they require fair market value as the standard of value for marital assets. But when you look at the actual application in those jurisdictions, they may treat personal goodwill or goodwill differently in one jurisdiction compared to the other. So literally they can have the same rules, but have them be applied differently. So it requires that you not just stay abreast of the rules, but follow very closely the jurisdiction specific application of those rules as they relate to what you're calculating. So that's sort of one interesting, frustrating, but necessary evil in forensic accounting.
So would you say or what would be some important habits to form while we're going through college to prepare us for being like public accountants or forensic accountants?
I was an excellent Call of Duty player at one point in time, but that didn't really help me out in forensic accounting, but it did give me that drive. Just kidding, but I would say, be detailed, learn how to be honest with yourself. One of the things about forensic accounting, and this is regardless of if you work by yourself or if you have people over you that are checking your work, or if you're the person reviewing someone's work. If you have to testify in court to something, you need to know and be honest with yourself. Did I do everything that I was supposed to do? And for the most part, if you understand the standards and the requirements, you're going to know. You're going to have to really be very disciplined internally with yourself, and that goes to like with your studies, eating habits, sleeping habits, taking care of yourself. Like one of the most important things about testifying is making sure you eat before you do it, because otherwise you could get an hour into your testimony, and if you haven't eaten, you're going to be sitting there on the stand snapping back at the lawyer asking you questions. So it requires a physical and mental discipline that a lot of times we as professionals don't pay attention to. And I think you start those habits in school. I'm a big geek. I literally, for fun, like I read case law and standards and weird stuff. That's like literally how my ideal day of fun would be, to read like 20 cases and a bunch of different interpretations of accounting standards. That's like what I do for fun. You don't have to be that bad, but I would, as early as possible, develop a sort of a thirst for knowledge and building your intellectual capacity. Because if you're going to try to be a forensic expert of any type, if you're going to testify in court at all, the only way you're going to be able to do that on a long-term basis is through continued professional education, as well as continued self research. you have to have that drive to want to know as much as you can know about a subject, especially if you're going to try to pull off, having the job label as expert. And that begins now, like while you're in your undergrad. You don't have to be as hardcore, like crazy as I am. You can devote your efforts to other things too. But I think it is very important that no one fool themselves that after you graduate or even after you pass your CPA exam, if you stop learning at that point and you want to try to be an expert, you're dead in the water. You'll be irrelevant and obsolete very quickly. Those experts fall to the side. You have to go ahead and start a process of continued learning and a thirst for knowledge and sort of seeking out of the right answer. I think that's very important, and that's something that you're only going to really start to do right now with your studies. And I know accounting is very hard. I mean, it's one of the best decisions I ever made was to become an accounting major and to stick with it. And accounting is very hard, and I wasn't the best student, but literally, it's not just the complexity of the stuff that you're learning, it's the process, it's the routine, staying up and studying, the allocation of your time. All of those things go into it, and those sort of disciplines are something that you don't see in all subject areas that you can get a degree in. Every subject area has its own certain thing that's more difficult than others, but accounting it generally requires a lot of discipline. But if you're going to be an expert or a forensic accounting expert or something like that, you got to take it to the next level. And you got to not just be satisfied with knowing a little bit about something. You literally are going to be going and testifying in court that you're an expert in something. And you got to convince a judge and a jury that you are an expert. And so you're going to have to continuously learn, and you can start that right now.
Okay, thank you.
Well, Zach, we really appreciate you joining us, especially back to back. I know that has to be tiring, but we certainly did learn a lot.
Yeah, tax court is way worse than that. Whenever you have the IRS like grilling you for like 3 hours, that's hard. This is easy. This is good stuff. If anybody has any extra questions or anything and wants to reach out to me, like I said, I may not get right back to you, but I try to be as accessible and responsive as I can. And there's no stupid question, and any help I can provide, I will do my best to provide it. And you guys are already on the right step just by being accounting majors. You have no idea how much of an advantage and how much you are already on the right path. Even if you're not getting straight A's, you just keep going. Finish your accounting degree, get your CPA, and the sky's the limit. You can do tons and tons of different things with an accounting degree. So good luck to everybody.
Once again, thank you so much. We really appreciate it, and we definitely want to have you back again.
Anytime.
All right. Ashlee, did you have any announcements that you need to go through? We're going to kind of call this meeting to a close, but I know you